My name is Amanda Parker and I'm 29 years old. I never thought I'd be living in my parents' basement at this age, but life had other plans. When they invited me to dinner upstairs last Friday, I expected pot roast and small talk, not an eviction notice. "You have 2 days to get your stuff out," my father said between bites of mashed potatoes. The shock hit me like a physical blow, but as tears threatened, something else sparked inside me instead: determination. They thought I was finished, but I was just getting started. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Hit that subscribe button if you want more real-life comeback stories, and give this video a like if you've ever had to prove someone wrong who underestimated you. 8 months ago, I had what I thought was the perfect life. A corner office with a view of the Chicago skyline, a sleek downtown apartment, and the marketing director title I'd been chasing since college. Windsor & Klein was a prestigious firm, and at 28, I was their youngest director, managing campaigns for major national brands. My parents bragged about me at their country club. My Instagram looked like a success story. I was living the dream until I wasn't. The email came on a Tuesday afternoon. "Due to corporate restructuring, your position has been eliminated effective immediately." 30 minutes later, I was escorted out of the building with my personal items in a cardboard box. No warning, no severance beyond 2 weeks, just corporate security watching me clean out my desk while former colleagues averted their eyes. 12 years of education and 6 years of ladder climbing, gone in 30 minutes. The Chicago job market for marketing executives was brutal. What I thought was an impressive resume suddenly seemed inadequate when competing against people with twice my experience who'd also been laid off. My savings, which had seemed substantial, evaporated quickly between Chicago rent, student loan payments, and health insurance. After 3 months of fruitless job hunting and dwindling bank accounts, I made the call I never wanted to make. "Mom? I need to come home for a while." My voice cracked as I asked, feeling like a child again. To their credit, my parents immediately said yes. My father even drove the U-Haul to help me move my life back to Naperville, Illinois. "Stay as long as you need," my mother said as we carried boxes of designer clothes and awards from marketing competitions down to their finished basement. "We're just glad you're safe and have a place to land." Those first few weeks weren't terrible. Mom made my favorite meals. Dad helped me set up a workstation in the basement for my job search. My childhood bedroom had been converted to a home gym years ago, but the basement had a comfortable pull-out sofa and enough space for my belongings. I told myself it was temporary, a month, maybe 2. But as weeks turned into months, the atmosphere changed. I caught the concerned glances between my parents when they thought I wasn't looking. The encouraging "something will turn up soon" comments became less frequent, replaced by suggestions for jobs I was overqualified for and questions about whether my expectations were realistic in this economy. Depression settled over me like a heavy blanket. I'd wake up late, spend hours scrolling through job listings, send out applications that disappeared into the void, then numb myself with Netflix until 2 a.m. Rejections piled up. Interviews were few and far between, and each we've decided to go with another candidate email chipped away at my self-worth. My parents' patience began to wear thin around month 5. The concerned glances became pointed comments. "Have you thought about retail work while you look?" my mother would ask over breakfast. "Your cousin Patrick started at the factory floor and now he's a supervisor," my father would remind me. They didn't understand that taking a job bagging groceries wouldn't just be a step back, it would be an admission of defeat. That marketing director position had been my identity. Without it, who was I? The arguments started small but grew more intense. About my sleeping schedule. About the dishes I left in the sink. About the job market. About my attitude. Every interaction became strained as their disappointment in me became palpable. I was no longer their successful daughter but a burden they hadn't planned for in their empty nest years. The Wednesday before the fateful dinner, I had overheard them talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. "She can't keep living like this, James," my mother had whispered. "It's not healthy." "I know, Elizabeth," my father replied. But what are we supposed to do? Kick our own daughter out when she has nowhere to go? Dr. Myers says we might be enabling her. That sometimes people need a push. I'd slipped back downstairs before hearing more, but their words haunted me. They were talking to someone about me, making plans, consulting experts. The shame burned deeper than I thought possible. Friday morning, my mother had asked me to join them for dinner that night. "I'm making pot roast, your favorite," she'd said with a forced brightness that should have been my first warning sign. "We'd like to have a nice family dinner, just the three of us." I'd agreed, hoping it might be a chance to reconnect, to show them I was trying. I even put on a nice blouse and applied makeup for the first time in weeks. Maybe, I thought, we could start fresh. Maybe tonight we could talk like adults instead of disappointed parents and their failure of a daughter. How wrong I was. The dining room had an air of formality that should have tipped me off. Mom had set the table with the good china, the set usually reserved for Thanksgiving and Christmas. A bottle of wine was already open, breathing next to my father's place setting. Classical music played softly from the speakers, Vivaldi's Four Seasons creating a soundtrack that felt oddly ominous. "This looks amazing," I said, taking my seat across from my father. My mother had outdone herself, pot roast with carrots and potatoes, fresh rolls, green beans with almonds, and I could smell apple pie baking for dessert. It was a meal that took hours to prepare. A last meal, I would later realize. The conversation started innocently enough. Dad talked about his golf game. Mom mentioned her book club's latest selection. I shared details of a promising job listing I'd found that morning. We existed in a bubble of forced normalcy, clinking glasses, and passing dishes as if we were just a regular family enjoying dinner together. It happened between the main course and dessert. Dad cleared his throat, the sound cutting through Vivaldi's delicate strings. Mom suddenly became very interested in folding her napkin into precise quarters. "Amanda," my father said, his voice steady but with an unfamiliar edge, "your mother and I need to talk to you about your living situation." My stomach nodded immediately. I set down my wine glass, already knowing whatever came next would require my full attention. "We've been patient," he continued. "We've given you time and space to figure things out. But it's been 8 months now, and we're not seeing the progress we hoped for." "What your father is trying to say," my mother interjected, her voice gentler but no less resolved, "is that we think you need a push. We can't watch you waste away in our basement forever." "I'm not wasting away," I protested. "I'm actively looking for jobs. I had that interview at Thompson Media last week." "And what came of that?" Dad asked, eyebrows raised. I looked down at my plate. "They went with an internal candidate." "Of course they did." He sighed heavily. "Amanda, this can't continue. You sleep until noon. You barely leave the house. Your mother found empty wine bottles hidden behind the washing machine." The shame burned hot in my cheeks. I had a bad night. That was one time. "It's not just that," Mom said. "It's everything. You're not the Amanda we know. Our daughter is ambitious, hardworking, resilient. This person living in our basement is stuck. So you've been talking about me. Making decisions about my life." The hurt in my voice was evident, but they pressed on. "We've been consulting with Dr. Myers," Mom admitted. "She's a family therapist. She thinks we might be enabling your situation." "My situation?" I repeated, voice rising. "You mean my unemployment? My failure?" "Just say it, Mom. Don't take that tone with your mother," Dad warned. "We're trying to help you." "By doing what exactly?" I challenged, although part of me already knew the answer. He looked me straight in the eyes. "You have 2 days to get your stuff out." The words hung in the air between us. Even though I'd overheard their conversations, even though I'd sensed something was coming, the actual ultimatum knocked the wind from my lungs. 2 days? I finally managed. "Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do?" You're 29 years old, Amanda, Mom said. You're smart and capable when you want to be. Figure it out. We're not saying you can never come back, Dad added. We're saying you need to stand on your own 2 feet again. Find an apartment. Take any job, even if it's not your dream position. Start rebuilding. This is cruel, I whispered, tears threatening. You know I can't afford an apartment. Maybe you have friends you can stay with temporarily, Mom suggested. Or your brother might have space. Michael? I laughed bitterly. He thinks I'm as pathetic as you do. As if summoned by his name, the front door opened, and my brother Michael walked in. At 32, he was the golden child, married, successful in real estate, with a house in the nice part of town. His timing couldn't have been worse. Hey, sorry I'm late, he called, hanging up his coat. Traffic was. He stopped short when he entered the dining room, immediately sensing the tension. What did I miss? Your parents are kicking me out, I said before they could answer. I have 2 days to disappear from their perfect lives. Michael looked between our parents, clearly having been briefed beforehand. They told me they were going to talk to you tonight. It's not about making you disappear, Amanda. It's about helping you. You knew about this? The betrayal cut deeper. You all sat around discussing my failures and planning my eviction like some kind of intervention? It is an intervention, Michael said gently. We're all worried about you. That was the final straw. I stood up so quickly my chair toppled backward, crashing against the hardwood floor. None of you have any idea what I'm going through, I said, my voice breaking. None of you have ever failed at anything in your perfect lives. It's easy to judge from your high horses. That's not fair, Mom began, but I was beyond reason. 2 days? Fine. I'll be gone tomorrow. You won't have to worry about your embarrassment of a daughter anymore. I stormed out, ignoring their calls to come back, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the family photos that lined the hallway, images of happier times that now seemed like they belonged to someone else's life. In my car, parked in the driveway of my childhood home, I finally broke down. Sobs racked my body as reality set in. I had no job, minimal savings, and nowhere to go. The Chicago friends I'd once hosted lavish dinner parties with had slowly disappeared during my unemployment. Out of sight, out of mind. My contacts list suddenly seemed full of acquaintances rather than friends. After 20 minutes of crying, I sat up straight and wiped my eyes. The initial wave of emotion had passed, leaving behind a strange clarity. I had 2 choices. I could continue the tantrum, prove them right about my inability to handle adult challenges, or I could face this head-on, with dignity and determination. Taking a deep breath, I started the car and pulled out of the driveway. I needed space to think, to plan. I'd drive around for a while, then return when I was calmer. 2 days wasn't much time, but it was all I had. Somehow, I would make it work. I had to. Sleep was impossible that night. I returned to the house around midnight, tiptoeing down to the basement to avoid another confrontation. My mind raced through options, none of them viable. My savings account held exactly $843.27, not enough for first and last month's rent plus security deposit, even in the cheapest parts of town. I'd need at least $2,500 to secure housing. I made list after list until the numbers blurred before my eyes. Minimum wage jobs that might hire immediately. Friends from college I hadn't spoken to in years but might let me crash on their couches. Distant relatives who owed my parents favors. Each possibility seemed more desperate than the last. At 5 a.m., I finally dozed off, only to wake at 7:30 to the sound of my mother in the kitchen above me. Gathering my courage, I went upstairs. We needed to talk. Mom was at the counter, mechanically stirring creamer into her coffee. She looked as tired as I felt. Is this really happening? I asked without preamble. You're really throwing me out tomorrow? She turned, her expression a mixture of resolve and regret. Amanda, please try to understand. We've watched you spiral for months. Nothing we've tried has helped. Sometimes the hardest decisions are made out of love. Love? I repeated incredulously. You call this love? We can't keep enabling behaviors that are hurting you. Dr. Myers says. I don't care what Dr. Myers says. I snapped. She doesn't know me. She hasn't lost everything like I have. Mom set down her coffee. That's just it, Amanda. You haven't lost everything. You lost a job. It happens to people every day. But you've let it become your entire identity, your excuse to stop trying. Her words stung because there was truth in them. I had been using my layoff as a reason to hide from the world, to avoid the possibility of more rejection. I need more time, I said, voice softening. Just a few more weeks to find something. We've already extended the deadline twice in our own minds, she admitted. First it was 3 months, then 6. We can't keep moving the goalposts. Where's Dad? I asked, changing tactics. At the hardware store. He's struggling with this too, Amanda. I nodded slowly, realizing I wouldn't get anywhere with either of them. Fine. I need to make some calls. I spent the next 3 hours on my phone, calling every friend I could think of. Most sent me straight to voicemail. Those who answered expressed sympathy but had no space, no leads, no solutions. By noon, I was back where I started. Apartment listings online confirmed what I already knew. I couldn't afford anything, not even the sketchiest studio in the worst part of town. Not without income. I was seriously contemplating my car as temporary housing when my email notification chimed. The subject line read, Interview Follow-up, Marketing Position at Bright Idea Consulting. I stared at it, confused. I didn't remember applying at a company called Bright Idea Consulting. Opening the email, I realized why. I'd applied over 2 months ago and had completely forgotten about it in the blur of rejections. Dear Ms. Parker, thank you for your application for our marketing strategist position. We apologize for the delayed response. Our hiring process was temporarily paused due to internal restructuring. If you are still interested in the position, we would like to schedule an interview today at 3 p.m. Please confirm your availability. Best regards, Rachel Lynn, owner, Bright Idea Consulting. Today. In 3 hours. A lifeline appearing out of nowhere. I immediately confirmed, then flew into preparation mode. My interview suit needed ironing. My portfolio needed updating. My hair, I glanced in the mirror and winced, definitely needed washing. For the first time in months, adrenaline replaced depression. I had a purpose, a deadline that wasn't about eviction but opportunity. I showered, blow-dried my hair, applied makeup with care rather than haste. The woman in the mirror looked more like the marketing director I'd once been and less like the basement dweller I'd become. Bright Idea Consulting turned out to be a small office in downtown Naperville, above a boutique coffee shop. Nothing like the gleaming skyscraper where I'd worked in Chicago, but charming in its own way. A hand-painted sign on a restored brick building suggested creativity, if not corporate prestige. Rachel Lynn was not what I expected. In her early 40s, she wore jeans, a blazer, and bright yellow sneakers. Her office was a mix of professionalism and personality. Awards lined one wall, while another featured a mural of famous marketing campaigns through history. Amanda Parker, she said, shaking my hand firmly. Your resume is impressive. Windsor & Klein is no small name in the industry. Thank you, I replied, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. I'm very interested in learning more about Bright Idea Consulting. The interview proceeded normally at first. Rachel asked about my experience, my strengths and weaknesses, my approach to marketing challenges. I fell into the familiar rhythm of professional conversation, almost forgetting the chaos of my personal circumstances. Then came the question I dreaded. So why are you interested in joining a small local agency after working for a national firm in Chicago? I had prepared a standard answer about seeking new challenges and appreciating the creativity of boutique agencies. The words were on the tip of my tongue. But something stopped me. Perhaps the genuine interest in Rachel's expression, or perhaps the realization that I had nothing left to lose. The truth? I heard myself saying. I was laid off 8 months ago. I've been struggling to find work since. I'm currently living in my parents' basement, and as of yesterday, I have until tomorrow to move out with nowhere to go. This interview isn't just about a job for me. It might be the difference between having a roof over my head next week or not. Rachel's eyebrows rose slightly, but her expression remained neutral. That's remarkably honest. I'm sorry, I said immediately. That was unprofessional. I should have. No, she interrupted, leaning forward. It was refreshingly honest. I've sat through hundreds of interviews where candidates pretend everything in their lives is perfect. I appreciate knowing where you actually stand. She studied me for a moment, then seemed to make a decision. I'll be equally honest with you, Amanda. I need someone with your level of experience. My business is growing faster than I can handle alone, and I've lost potential clients because I can't keep up with the workload. But I can't match what you made at Windsor and Klein. Not even close. My heart sank, but I nodded. I understand. At this point, I'm prepared to be realistic about compensation. Here's my situation, Rachel continued. I have a potential client meeting tomorrow afternoon, a regional restaurant chain looking to rebrand. If I land this account, I can afford to bring someone on immediately. If not, it might be another month before I can make you an offer. Tomorrow, I repeated, thinking of my deadline. That's cutting it close. Rachel tapped her pen against her desk, then made another decision. I have a proposal for you. It's unconventional, but it might solve both our problems. I'm listening. Create a marketing plan for this restaurant chain tonight. A complete strategy, social media, traditional advertising, customer engagement, the works. If it's good enough to help me land this client, I'll hire you on the spot. I'll even advance you enough for a security deposit on an apartment. My mind raced. You want me to create an entire marketing plan overnight? Yes. It's a test of both your skills and your commitment. I need someone who can deliver under pressure. You need a job immediately. This solves both problems, if you're up for it. It was crazy. Impossible. I hadn't created a marketing plan from scratch in months. I was out of practice, out of confidence. But I was also out of options. What's the restaurant chain? I asked. Rachel smiled. Harvest Table. They're farm-to-table dining, currently at 3 locations but looking to expand to 10 within 2 years. They need a cohesive brand identity that works across multiple markets while maintaining their local, sustainable ethos. I nodded slowly. I'll do it. Excellent. She stood and extended her hand. Email me the plan by 10 a.m. tomorrow. My meeting with them is at 1 p.m. As I left the office, I felt a strange mixture of terror and exhilaration. 24 hours to create a comprehensive marketing plan. 24 hours to determine my entire future. 24 hours to prove my parents wrong about me. The clock was ticking. I returned home to find boxes stacked by my bed. My mother's not-so-subtle reminder of tomorrow's deadline. Ignoring the pang of hurt, I sat up at my desk and got to work. First, research on Harvest Table, their current branding, menu, customer base, competitors, online presence. I worked methodically, the familiar process coming back like muscle memory. Hours passed in a blur of concentration. I sketched logo refinements, outlined social media strategies, drafted customer loyalty programs. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again, the professional marketer who had once commanded respect in boardrooms, not the depressed basement dweller my parents had come to resent. Around 8 p.m., my father came downstairs. He watched me silently for a moment, seemingly surprised by my focused intensity. You're packing, he noted, gesturing to a half-filled box of books. And working, I replied without looking up from my laptop. I have a job interview. Well, a job test. I need to create a marketing plan by tomorrow morning. Something shifted in his expression, surprise, perhaps even a hint of respect. That sounds promising. It is. I finally met his gaze. If I nail this, I could have a job by tomorrow afternoon. The owner even mentioned advancing me money for an apartment deposit. He nodded slowly. That's good. That's really good, Amanda. An awkward silence fell between us. Neither of us knew how to bridge the gap that had formed. I'll let you work, he finally said, turning to go. Dad, I called after him. He paused at the stairs. I know you and Mom think you're doing the right thing. I don't agree with your methods, but I understand the intention. His shoulders relaxed slightly. We just want you to find yourself again. After he left, I returned to work with renewed determination. As midnight approached, I hit a wall. The marketing plan was taking shape, but something was missing, the spark that would make it truly outstanding. I needed inspiration. Pushing aside my laptop, I began unpacking a box labeled office stuff that I hadn't touched since moving from Chicago. Inside were awards from marketing competitions, notebooks from successful campaigns, and a portfolio of my best work from Windsor and Klein. Flipping through the portfolio, I rediscovered my own creativity, my own voice. These campaigns hadn't just been assignments, they'd been expressions of my marketing philosophy, my understanding of human psychology and desire. I had been good at my job. Really good. What had happened to that confidence? When had I started defining myself by rejection rather than ability? Energized, I returned to the marketing plan with fresh eyes. I worked through the night, fueled by coffee and rediscovered passion. As dawn broke, I put the finishing touches on a comprehensive strategy that incorporated everything I knew about modern marketing with the creativity I'd once been known for. At 6:30 a.m., I heard movement upstairs. My mother was awake. Saving my work and setting my laptop to print the finished plan, I went upstairs to face her. She was at the kitchen table, staring into her coffee cup. She looked up when I entered, taking in my disheveled appearance and the dark circles under my eyes. Have you been up all night? She asked. Working, I replied. I have a potential job opportunity. Like my father, she seemed taken aback by this development. That's wonderful. What kind of position? Marketing strategist at a local agency. The owner gave me a test, create an entire marketing plan overnight for a client she's pitching today. If she likes it, I get the job. Mom's expression softened. Amanda, that's exactly the kind of initiative we've been hoping to see. Because you backed me into a corner, I couldn't help pointing out. Sometimes corners are where we find our strength, she replied quietly. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. At 6:45 a.m.? Mom looked as confused as I felt. She went to answer it, returning moments later with my brother Michael. What are you doing here so early? I asked. Michael looked uncomfortable. I came to help you pack. Maybe help you move some things to my place temporarily. I stared at him. Your place? He shifted his weight, not meeting my eyes. I have a spare room. It's small, just an office really, but there's space for an air mattress. Until you figure something out. You're offering me a place to stay? I clarified, unable to keep the surprise from my voice. Yesterday at dinner, you were completely on board with them kicking me out. I'm on board with you needing a push, he corrected. Not with you being homeless. There's a difference. A lump formed in my throat. Despite our differences, despite his participation in the intervention, my brother was offering a safety net. Thank you, I said simply. That means a lot. Don't thank me yet, he warned. My spare room is tiny, my wife is pregnant and moody, and you'll have to contribute to groceries and utilities. It's not a free ride. I wouldn't expect one. For the first time, I smiled. Besides, I might not need it. If this marketing plan lands me the job today, I'll be able to get my own place soon. Michael looked skeptical but supportive. That would be the best outcome. But the offer stands either way. As he helped me pack boxes into his SUV, I realized something important. My parents' ultimatum had been harsh, but it had forced me to take action in ways months of gentle encouragement hadn't. The deadline had pushed me to seek opportunity rather than wallow in self-pity. And my family, despite their tough love approach, hadn't actually abandoned me. By 8 a.m., I had emailed my marketing plan to Rachel, packed half of my belongings into Michael's car, and was running on nothing but adrenaline and coffee. Exhausted but accomplished, I finally collapsed onto my bed for a few hours of sleep before Rachel's verdict would determine my next steps. For the first time in months, I fell asleep not with dread, but with hope. My alarm jolted me awake at 11 a.m. I had a text from Rachel, "Got your plan. Can you come to the office at noon to discuss before my client meeting?" That didn't sound promising. Discuss what exactly? Still, it was better than an outright rejection. I showered quickly, dressed in my interview suit again, and headed downtown with my portfolio and extra copies of the marketing plan, just in case. Rachel's expression when I entered her office was unreadable. The marketing plan I'd created was spread across her desk, sections highlighted, notes in the margins. "You look exhausted," she observed. "I worked through the night," I admitted. "But I'm ready to discuss any questions you have before your meeting." She gestured for me to sit. "Amanda, your plan is..." My heart sank as she paused. "Not what you're looking for," I supplied. "Technically brilliant but fundamentally flawed," she finished. "You've created a national-level campaign for a small regional chain. The budget alone would bankrupt them within 3 months." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Of course. I'd been thinking like a director at a major agency with major clients, not like a small business owner with limited resources. "The creative elements are excellent," Rachel continued. "Your understanding of brand identity and customer psychology is obvious. But the execution..." She shook her head. "It's simply not feasible for a client this size." "I can revise it," I said quickly. "Scale it down, adjust the budget, keep the core concepts but make the implementation more realistic." Rachel checked her watch. "My meeting is in just over an hour. That's not enough time for a complete overhaul." "What if I come with you?" I suggested desperately. "I can present the creative vision but adapt the implementation details on the fly based on their feedback." She considered this for a moment. "That's risky. I don't usually bring untested people to pitch meetings." "Please," I said, hating the pleading in my voice but unable to stop it. "I need this opportunity. I'll make it work, I promise." Rachel studied me, then made a decision. "No. I can't risk it. Not with this client." My hopes crashed. Without this job, I'd be sleeping on my brother's air mattress tonight, back to square one of my job search. "But," she continued, "I'm not giving up on you yet. Revise the plan. Make it realistic for a small business with growth potential but limited current resources. I want it on my desk by 5 p.m. today." "But your meeting is at 1 p.m., I pointed out, confused. "This isn't about today's meeting anymore. It's about whether you can adapt and learn from criticism. Show me you can do that, and we can discuss next steps." It wasn't the immediate salvation I'd hoped for, but it was something. A second chance. "I'll do it." As I left her office, the weight of my situation hit me anew. I had nowhere to go, no quiet place to work. My parents were expecting me out by evening. Michael would take me in, but his house would be chaotic, hardly conducive to focused work. Sitting in my car, I made a desperate call to the one person who might understand my predicament, Jessica Wilkins, my former colleague from Windsor and Klein. "Amanda?" She sounded surprised to hear from me. "It's been months." "I know, and I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I've been struggling. But I need your help, Jessica. Professional help." I explained my situation, the layoff, the depression, my parents' ultimatum, and now this crucial revision that could determine my employment prospects. You need a quiet place to work and a professional eye on your marketing plan, she summarized. Yes. Exactly. She was silent for a moment, then sighed. My home office is yours for the afternoon. But Amanda, I'm not going to sugarcoat my feedback. If this plan has problems, I'm going to tell you straight. Relief flooded me. That's exactly what I need. Thank you. Jessica's condo was in Schaumburg, about 20 minutes from Naperville. Her home office was immaculate, with dual monitors and the latest marketing software, a stark contrast to my makeshift basement setup. Let me see what you've created, she said after settling me at her desk. I pulled up the marketing plan and watched nervously as she read through it, her expression becoming increasingly critical. Oh, Amanda, she finally said, leaning back in her chair. This is Windsor and Klein thinking applied to a mom-and-pop operation. It's like using a sledgehammer to hang a picture frame. Her criticism stung, but I needed it. That's what Rachel said, essentially. I need to scale it back without losing the creative core. Jessica nodded. But there's a bigger problem here. She turned to face me directly. You're still trying to prove you're a marketing director. This plan screams, look how sophisticated and high-level I can be. But that's not what this client or this agency needs. I blinked, taken aback by her assessment. What do you mean? You've been self-sabotaging, she said bluntly. Not just with this plan, but for months. You lost a director position, so you decided you couldn't accept anything less. You've been applying for executive roles you're qualified for on paper but need more diverse experience to truly excel in. You've been setting yourself up for rejection because it's easier than redefining your professional identity. Her words hit home with uncomfortable accuracy. I had been clinging to my former title, using it as both shield and excuse. So what do? I asked quietly. Start where you are, not where you were, Jessica advised. This small agency needs someone who understands both high-level strategy and ground-level implementation. Show Rachel you can be that person. Create a plan that's ambitious but achievable, creative but cost-effective. For the next 3 hours, I reworked the entire marketing plan from scratch. Jessica provided occasional guidance but mostly let me find my own way. I thought about Harvest Table not as a national brand in the making, but as a local business with deep community roots and limited resources. The new plan emphasized digital marketing with minimal overhead, local partnerships that required relationship building rather than big budgets, and phased implementation that would allow for growth without financial strain. It wasn't as flashy as my original plan, but it was realistic, effective, and tailored to the actual client. At 4:30 p.m., I emailed the revised plan to Rachel, then packed up my things. Thank you, I said to Jessica. Not just for the space, but for the honesty. That's what colleagues do, she replied. And Amanda? Don't disappear again. The industry is small, and connections matter. Especially during the rough patches. I nodded, newly humbled by the recognition that I'd cut myself off from potential support out of pride and shame. As I drove to my brother's house, my phone rang. Rachel. I just finished reading your revision, she said without preamble. This is exactly what I was looking for. You completely transformed the approach while maintaining the creative strength. How did you manage this in just a few hours? I had help, I admitted. A former colleague gave me some perspective. But mainly, I stopped trying to prove I was still a marketing director and started thinking about what the client actually needs. That's the insight I was hoping you'd reach, Rachel said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. The meeting with Harvest Table went well. They're interested, but they want to meet the person who would be handling their account day-to-day before making a decision. My breath caught. And that person would be you, if you want the job. Marketing strategist. The salary is about 60% of what you made at Windsor and Klein, but there's room for growth as we expand. And I can advance you $2,000 against your first month to help with apartment costs. It wasn't my dream offer. It wasn't the triumphant return to director-level status I'd imagined. But it was a solid position with a growing agency, an opportunity to rebuild. And most importantly, it was an offer when I needed one most. I accept, I said immediately. When do I start? Monday morning, 9 a.m. But first, you need to meet with Harvest Table tomorrow at 11. Can you manage that? Absolutely. As I pulled into Michael's driveway, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief at finding employment, gratitude for the support I'd received when I finally asked for it, and a lingering sadness about how things had ended with my parents. The ultimatum had worked as they'd intended, it had forced me to take action, but at what cost to our relationship? My brother was waiting at the door. Well? Any news? I got the job, I said, unable to keep the smile from my face despite my exhaustion. I start Monday. His face broke into a genuine grin. That's fantastic, Amanda. See? You just needed a little push. A little push, I repeated, thinking of the past 48 hours of emotional turmoil. Right. As we carried the last of my boxes inside, I knew there was one more difficult conversation I needed to have before this chapter of my life could truly close. The next morning, I woke early on Michael's uncomfortable air mattress. Despite the poor sleep, I felt more rested than I had in months. The weight of uncertainty had lifted, replaced by the challenges of new beginnings. I need to go see Mom and Dad today, I told Michael over coffee. There are still things that need to be said. He looked concerned. Are you sure that's a good idea? Maybe give it a few days, let emotions settle. No, I said firmly. I'm meeting with Rachel's client at 11, and then I'm going to see them. This needs to happen while I still have the courage. My brother nodded, understanding. Want me to come with you? Thanks, but this is something I need to do alone. The meeting with Harvest Table went exceptionally well. The owners, a married couple who had started with one farm-to-table restaurant and expanded through sheer determination, responded enthusiastically to my scaled-down, community-focused marketing approach. By noon, they had signed with Bright Idea Consulting, specifically requesting me as their account manager. Rachel was elated. This is our biggest account yet, she told me as we walked to our cars after the meeting. The advance I promised you is ready whenever you need it. I appreciate that more than you know, I replied. But first, I have one more difficult conversation to get through today. She nodded understandingly. Family stuff? Family stuff, I confirmed. Driving to my parents' house felt strange. It was no longer my home, yet it contained most of my belongings and 2 decades of memories. I parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, gathering my thoughts and courage. The front door opened before I could knock. My mother stood there, looking tired and uncertain. Amanda, she said, surprise evident in her voice. We weren't expecting you. I know. Can I come in? I need to talk to you and Dad. She stepped aside, leading me to the living room where my father sat in his usual chair, reading glasses perched on his nose as he went through bills. He looked up, equally surprised to see me. Amanda. I got a job, I said without preamble. Marketing strategist at a small agency in Naperville. I start Monday. Their faces registered shock, then cautious joy. That's wonderful news, Mom said, sitting beside me on the couch. How did this happen so quickly? I explained about Rachel, the marketing plan, Jessica's help, and this morning's successful client meeting. With each detail, their expressions shifted from surprise to pride. So you see, I concluded, your ultimatum worked. I found a job, I have housing arrangements with Michael temporarily, and I'll be able to afford my own apartment within weeks. We're so proud of you, Dad said, leaning forward in his chair. This is exactly what we hoped would happen. Is it? I asked, unable to keep a hint of bitterness from my voice. Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you gave up on me when I needed support the most. Mom's face fell. Amanda, that's not. Let me finish, I said firmly. I understand why you did what you did. I even recognize that I needed a push. But the way you went about it, the family dinner ambush, the 2-day deadline, discussing me with Michael behind my back, it hurt. Deeply. To my surprise, my mother's eyes filled with tears. We were terrified for you, she admitted, voice breaking. Watching you spiral deeper into depression, seeing you give up on yourself, it was breaking our hearts. We tried gentle encouragement for months. It wasn't working. We consulted Dr. Myers because we didn't know what else to do, Dad added, removing his glasses to rub his eyes. The ultimatum was her suggestion, not something we came up with on our own. We were desperate, Mom continued. The drinking, the sleeping all day, the hopelessness in your eyes, we were losing you, Amanda. Maybe our approach was wrong, but our intentions weren't. I felt my anger softening at their obvious distress. I was in a bad place, I acknowledged. Worse than I probably realized. But I needed to find my way back in my own time. Did you, though? Dad asked gently. Would you have applied for this job if we hadn't forced the issue? I wanted to say yes, to insist I would have turned things around eventually, but honesty compelled me to shake my head. Probably not. At least not as quickly. A silence fell between us, heavy with shared pain but also with new understanding. I'm not moving the rest of my stuff out today, I finally said. I'd like to leave some things here while I get settled. If that's okay. Of course it's okay, Mom said quickly. This is still your home, Amanda. We weren't rejecting you, we were trying to help you find your way back to yourself. Dad cleared his throat. We have something for you. He retrieved an envelope from his desk drawer and handed it to me. Inside was a check for $1,500. What is this? I asked, confused. First month's rent, he explained. For when you find an apartment. We'd set it aside weeks ago, planning to offer it once you started actively job hunting again. You had this all along? I was stunned. Even while giving me the ultimatum? Mom nodded. We wanted you to find your independence again, not to struggle unnecessarily once you did. I stared at the check, emotions churning. They had planned a safety net I never knew existed. The ultimatum had been real, but so was their support, just not in the form I expected or demanded. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, good news. Can advance $2,500 instead of $2,000. Let me know where to send the check. I showed my parents the message. Between this and your check, I can afford a decent apartment right away. I won't need to stay with Michael more than a week or two. That's wonderful, Mom said, genuine relief in her voice. Dad cleared his throat again. There's one more thing we wanted to say. We're sorry for how we handled this. We were trying to help, but we hurt you in the process. That was never our intention. It was the apology I hadn't known I needed. Not for the ultimatum itself, but for the manner of its delivery, for the pain it had caused despite the positive outcome. I'm sorry too, I said softly. For taking advantage of your generosity. For giving up on myself. For making you worry. Mom reached for my hand. How about dinner? A real family dinner this time, without ultimatums or tears. Just to celebrate your new job. The tension that had defined our relationship for months finally began to dissolve. I'd like that, I replied. But can we order pizza? I think we've all had enough drama in the dining room for a while. Dad laughed, the sound warming the room. Pizza it is. As we sat around the kitchen table that evening, eating pizza and talking about my new job prospects, I realized something important. The ultimatum that had seemed so cruel had been a painful gift. It had forced me to confront my inertia, to reconnect with my professional identity, and ultimately, to take control of my life again. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. A new job at lower pay, an apartment I'd have to budget carefully for, professional relationships to rebuild. But for the first time in 8 months, I was moving forward instead of hiding in place. Sometimes, it takes losing your safety net to remember you knew how to fly all along. 1 month later, I stood in the middle of my new apartment, surrounded by boxes and IKEA furniture waiting to be assembled. It wasn't the luxury downtown Chicago apartment I'd once had, just a modest one-bedroom in a decent Naperville neighborhood, but it was mine, paid for with my own salary from Bright Idea Consulting. The past month had been a whirlwind of changes. After a week on Michael's air mattress, I'd found this apartment and signed a lease, using the combined funds from Rachel's advance and my parents' gift. My first few weeks at work had been challenging but exhilarating. Rachel was a demanding boss but also an incredible mentor, pushing me to think differently about marketing for small to mid-sized businesses. The Harvest Table account was flourishing under my management. My community-focused approach had increased their dinner reservations by 22% in just 3 weeks. Rachel had already hinted at a potential raise if numbers continued to improve, and 2 more local businesses had signed with the agency specifically requesting to work with me. But the professional success, satisfying as it was, paled in comparison to the personal growth. Every Sunday night, I now had dinner at my parents' house. Not out of obligation or necessity, but from a genuine desire to maintain our healing relationship. The conversations were different now, adult to adult, rather than parent to dependent child. My father had started sharing stories of his own career setbacks, struggles I'd never known about because he'd always presented himself as the infallible provider. My mother had admitted how much she'd worried about enabling my depression by being too supportive, the impossible balance she'd tried to strike. My relationship with Michael had deepened too. The week at his house had given us time to talk like we hadn't since childhood. His wife's pregnancy had made him reflective about family, legacy, and the support systems we build around ourselves. What had started as an emergency housing arrangement had rebuilt a sibling bond that had frayed during our adult years. I'd maintained contact with Jessica as well, meeting for coffee every other week to discuss industry trends and opportunities. She'd become not just a former colleague but a true mentor, helping me navigate the transition from corporate marketing to small business strategies. And Rachel. Rachel had taken a chance on me when I was at my lowest, seeing potential where I'd forgotten it existed. Our working relationship was evolving into a genuine partnership. She'd already mentioned plans to expand the agency within the year, with a possible associate director position opening up. As I unpacked books onto newly assembled shelves, my phone rang. It was Rachel. "How's the apartment coming along?" she asked. "Slowly but surely," I replied, surveying the chaos around me. "I forgot how much I hate assembling furniture." She laughed. "Listen, I'm calling because something exciting just happened. Remember that marketing competition I mentioned, the Regional Excellence Awards?" Of course. It was a prestigious annual competition for marketing professionals in the Midwest. The Harvest Table campaign has been shortlisted in the small business category. If we win, it would put Bright Idea Consulting on the map in a major way. My breath caught. That's incredible. But the campaign has barely launched. The judges were impressed with the strategy and initial results, Rachel explained. They want us to present the full campaign at the awards ceremony next month. Both of us? Both of us? I repeated, stunned. It's your campaign as much as mine at this point, Amanda. I want you there as an equal partner in this presentation. After we hung up, I sat on my half-assembled couch, marveling at how much had changed in such a short time. 2 months ago, I'd been sleeping in my parents' basement, drowning in rejection and self-pity. Now I had an apartment, a promising career path, strengthened relationships, and professional recognition on the horizon. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Sunday dinner still on? Dad's making his famous pot roast." I smiled, typing back, "Wouldn't miss it. I'll bring dessert." The irony wasn't lost on me. Pot roast had been the meal that accompanied my parents' ultimatum, the dinner that had sent my life spiraling into crisis and then, unexpectedly, toward renewal. Now it was just Sunday dinner, a family tradition without the emotional baggage. As I returned to unpacking, I thought about the lessons of the past few months. How sometimes what feels like cruelty is actually care wearing a harsh disguise. How rock bottom can be a foundation rather than an endpoint. How losing everything might actually be losing what no longer serves you, making space for what does. I'd learned that professional identity is important but not all-encompassing. That asking for help isn't weakness but wisdom. That family relationships can evolve from dependency to interdependence with honest communication and mutual respect. Most importantly, I'd learned that failure isn't fatal, it's formative. My layoff hadn't been the end of my career but a necessary redirection. My parents' ultimatum hadn't been about rejection but about faith in my resilience. Sometimes the most painful experiences are actually painful gifts, forcing growth we'd otherwise avoid, pushing us toward versions of ourselves we couldn't otherwise become. Looking around my modest new apartment, a far cry from my Chicago luxury condo but somehow more satisfying, I realized I was exactly where I needed to be. Not where I'd planned to be at 29, certainly, but perhaps somewhere better, a place of authenticity, gratitude, and hard-won wisdom. So what about you? Have you ever experienced a painful ultimatum that turned out to be exactly what you needed? Or found yourself rebuilding after what felt like failure? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear how you turned your own rock bottom into a foundation for something better. Don't forget to subscribe if you want more stories about real-life comebacks, and hit that like button if this resonated with you. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is not getting what you thought you wanted. Until next time, this is Amanda Parker, signing off from a life under construction, and loving every minute of the rebuild.